Marcus Garvey and his organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, represents the largest mass movement in African American history. Proclaiming a black nationalist Back to Africa message, Garvey and the UNIA established 700 branches in 38 states by the early 1920s. While chapters existed in large urban areas such as New York, Chicago, LA, Garvey's message reached into small towns across the country as well. A film documenting his life and the impact he had is in the works. Check this out.
Garvey was able to achieve so much because he was truly a big dreamer.
Little black boy from St. Anne having this vision, not just for himself, but for his entire race.
He gave the black community a sense of pride. We were supposed to be savages. We were supposed to be thankful to the British Empire for enlightening us.
If you ask people in the village in which I live, does Africa have a history? They'd laugh at you. At one level, I wish Garvey was back here campaigning, saying, look, we have a history, we're as good as you. In fact, we were way ahead of you.
We go to school and we hear that Africans were slaves brought there. We never get no understanding of Africa before slavery.
Marcus Garvey was a critical part of that.
Were slaves brought there. We never get no understanding of Africa before slavery.
Marcus Garvey was a critical part. He brought intellectual order and organization to the rise of the modern 20th century.
He was able to get to the masses, talk to the working masses of black people, and that's why people were attracted to him.
When we heard Marcus Garvey and the whole Back to Africa movement, that was a missing link for us because we just couldn't find a connection at the time as far as our liberty in England as black youths in Britain.
Marcus Garvey was the Barack Obama of his day. For many of his followers, there was God and there was Garvey.
One God, one aim, one destiny.
It's hard for me to see how, under the circumstances that were far more difficult in this country and in New York and in my beloved Harlem, how he was able to motivate and bring together so many people of color, and how easy it was a handful of white folks to bring him down.
As part of our continuing series, Still Seeking Freedom, we're talking with the filmmaker of the documentary, Roy Anderson. Roy, how you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me on the show, Roland.
So one of the things that we've often talked about in previous segments of this, Julian has talked about this when it comes to lynching, is that the real threat that Marcus Garvey represented to this country was because he focused on black folks having financial independence. And that has always represented the greatest threat to white America when black folks start talking about money.
Well, he came up here and upset the status quo. You know, it's not only white folks that were upset at what he was talking about, but his fellow black Americans as well, too.
And why is that? Because from your research, why is that?
Well, here it is. I mean, a man from a country boy, as they would say, from Jamaica, an immigrant, you know, comes to this country. All of a sudden, you know, he's giving these black folks hope. You know, folks who came from the South. You got other immigrants that are that settled in New York. You know, W.B. Du Bois and all those other folks. I mean, they were on the scene. You know, they were preaching a message. But I think what Garvey did, he just appealed to that inner appeal among the black folks, because he just stepped on the scene and said, before it was even popular, black is beautiful. So he coined this term, the new Negro. And boy, he shook up a lot of folks there in New York and the greater America.
There's a clip of Dr. King talking about that very issue that folks really don't talk a lot about. But in that clip as well, he talked about how black folks have to write their own Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation to, in essence, free ourselves.
And MLK said that Marcus Garvey, was the first man that gave us Negroes a sense of dignity, made them feel that there was somebody.
Julianne, question?
Marcus Garvey really was a visionary. And one of the things that we were most disturbed about when you look at his history is how the FBI was able to bring him down on some bogus nonsense about mail fraud. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that the United States conspired basically to get this black man deported?
Well, let me tell you something. I had a conversation with Charlie Rangel, and he basically told me that when this movie comes out, J. Edgar Hoover is going to come from his grave because of some of the things we're going to say. But the fact of the matter is, Hoover, he put out missives to his folks that, hey, let's try and find out the way that we can deport this man because he's an undesirable alien, before Marcus Garvey even did anything on the scene. So what happened was they recruited some of the first black FBI agents. Well, it was the Bureau of Investigation at the time. They infiltrated Garvey's organization. And, some of these folks, they were really close to Marcus Garvey. They knew the inner workings and secrets of what was going on. And basically, they were writing reports every day and reporting back to headquarters about, what Garvey was doing. And it was a perfect storm that brewed that, them with this, and also the black folks who started this movement called Marcus Must Go, really brought him down.
Pam?
I'm actually curious about how Dr. Garvey got pride as a core component of the way black people needed to change their opinions. They needed to start thinking about themselves with pride. And why was that unique? Why was the first one who did that?
Well, let me tell you something. I mean, slavery does something to a person.
Yep.
I mean, it beats you over the head, even sometimes, harder than a sledgehammer. And basically, what Garvey was able to instill in his fellow black man was this sense of nationhood, of self-determination. So he talked about, this great black nation going back to Africa, but I think it was just not only a physical move, but it was also an inner spiritual move as well, too. His whole life was consumed with this thing called African redemption. In Garvey's lifetime, basically there weren't many redemptive narratives about the continent of Africa. There was a land of savages. Later on, we come to find out, well, based on what we see on TV, that, Tarzan really reigned over the jungle with all these natives. But Garvey sought to change that.
Greg?
It's good to see you, Brother Roy. I'm looking at that poster behind you in the first, that Queen Nanny documentary you did, one of your earlier documentaries, a brilliant piece, brother. And I was tempted to ask, oh yes, of course, tempted to ask you about women in the Garvey movement, Amy Jacques, Amy Ashwood Garvey. But since we have limited time, and Roland started this series in the wake of this New York Times 1619 project, but more importantly to say that we're not just going to talk about America. So I guess my question really is asking you, looking at the trailer, anticipating the documentary, looking at so many Africans from outside the United States, but understanding that Garvey's movement, the largest movement in black mass movement in history, most of its chapters were here in the United States, Africans in the United States. How do you expand this conversation, 1619 and now still seeking freedom, to help our people understand through your work that blackness is not confined to where you're born, but it's in fact an international piece. Garvey never set foot on the African continent. We've got this American descendants of slavery movement going on now, people saying, well, these are immigrants. But how does your documentary help us understand that whether you're from the Caribbean, from Latin America, from Africa, here in the United States, that we are indeed all one people?
Well, when you define that term Pan-Africanism, that involves the whole of the diaspora, whether you're in America, whether you're in the West Indies, the Caribbean, whether you're in Africa, Marcus Garvey's message was global. He wasn't just, he felt that he couldn't just stay in Jamaica and get that message across. So he came to America during the height of the Harlem Renaissance, did what he did in this country. And then after he was deported, he went to England because he said to really make a difference, you gotta go to the motherland, not the physical motherland, but England was a colonial empire. So he was able to spread his message, and he had this beautiful piece called The Negro World, which during his time, you would be delivering those papers at your own peril because you could be jailed for those in certain countries. But he influenced so many. In his lifetime, and even more so since he passed away in 1940.
When the documentary going to be released?
We're hoping by the fall of 2020, and we're just hoping for support. This is self-funded, and if you would indulge me, we're just hoping that folks can go to our website, www.garveythemovie.com. We're accepting contributions. Any amount will help. This is self-funded, and this is something definitely that Garvey would want.
GarveyTheMovie.com.
Thank you.
All right, Roy Anderson, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks.